right, hello and welcome to Wednesday night at Second Baptist Church, where we're striving to love God, love people, and serve the Lord. Hope you're all having a blessed night tonight, staying warm. A little bit. It's a little rough. It's kind of cool in here too, so everyone's bundling up a little bit, but I gotta keep them awake. Well, super. We're so glad you can be here tonight as we continue our studies on Wednesday night. Studying what it means to follow Jesus in just different areas of our lives, and we've been kind of traveling different paths, and so we're heading towards one of the important things that pastors always get in trouble for when they preach on it, and is generosity. Right? This is one of those things I always get a hard time. Church is always after my money. That's what I always hear. They're trying to get my money, and so. It's not that. It's not it. The church is not trying to get your money. It's the idea of generosity and a generous life. And as a disciple of Jesus, that's an important part of our life. That's an important part of what we do. We love people, and serving the Lord is giving to others and caring for them as God cared for us. So tonight we're going to talk about generosity and living a generous life. We're going to start out with our scripture verses is 1 Chronicles 29. Verse 14, and so what it is we're at the kind of end of David's life, and he's getting ready to pass on his lineage to his son Solomon. And Solomon's going to take the kingdom, become king. And the way it was is that David really wanted to build God a temple, because at this time they had the tabernacle, which was a tent that was where they worshiped God. And David had always wanted to build God a building. But God said, no, you're a man of war, and you do not need to be building this. Fascinating thing. But he said, your son will. And so this whole time, they get to the point where David's going to pass off to Solomon. This is kind of where we jump in here. Verse 14 of chapter 29 of 1 Chronicles says this, but who am I, and who are my people, that we should be able to give as generously as this, talking about for the temple. For everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your own hand. For we are aliens and temporary residents in your presence, as were all our ancestors. Our days on the earth are like a shadow. There we go. I think we're back on. So generosity. So we get a hold of the idea that God has blessed us with everything we have. And that's something we need to understand, that God created it all. That's what we believe as Christians. In the beginning, God made it all, the heavens, the earth, every part of it. So everything we have is on loan, even our health and our abilities to work, right? Because we are so blessed here in America. There are jobs out there. Sometimes they're hard to get. They're hard to get good ones. But
it takes a while.
But He provides those for us, right?
Amen.
Yeah. Yep. And He gives us the health to do that and the ability to work, right? Because sometimes we forget about that. Like, we know there's people who can't work, or those who have disabilities who are not able to. But He's given us the opportunity to. Those who are hearing this and who have the ability to give that way. And so God has blessed us with all these things. It's our job as stewards then to bless back and to give back as He has given to us. And so that's really what brings the idea of this in. And it's a fascinating thing, because I was reading some stuff about tithing and giving, and one of the funny things that the guys brought this up was talking about his kids. He said, look, when he was a kid, he used to, before he had a job, he would borrow money from his dad to go buy a Christmas gift for his dad to give to him on Christmas, because he didn't have a job or have money. And I think about that, because we give our kids money to buy Christmas presents, and they go out and do it. It's funny because, and then growing up did the same thing, and I always thought, wow, I'm doing something special, giving this to my dad, not realizing that he bought his own present, and I'm taking credit for it. And it's kind of the same thing in our lives. God is giving us the money to live a generous life. He's giving us the resources, because I say money, but generosity is a lifestyle. It doesn't mean just money. And if you look at the Old Testament, it was give what you had. And so the idea of generously giving is what you have and what God has blessed you with. We are just borrowing it from God to buy Him a present, to live out that love to our other people. And that's the idea of generosity we need to get a hold of. Not that the church wants our money, the church wants our stuff, another charity wants all our stuff. No, it's the idea of God is giving us these gifts to then, we give them back to God by blessing other people, right? Because that's what Jesus said, when I was hungry, when I was lonely, when I was naked, you took care of me. And that's a paraphrase there, but the same idea. Every time we take care of one of those in need and live generously, we're doing that unto God as a gift to God. Which comes to the idea of loving God with all we are and loving people, the second great commandment there. And so we got to get a whole idea. So we're going to talk about a generous living. So I want you to get an idea of the picture of a ladder, right? You guys know what a ladder is, or steps, something like that. Generosity is one of those things that if some people are blessed with a generous heart, right? Like they can just give everything away and not have a second thought about it. Right? And those people, they have the gift, they call it the gift of blessing, the gift of generosity. It actually is a spiritual gift. Some people have been given the gift just to give freely, not, no restraint. Just a heads up though, if you feel you have the gift of generosity, God blesses those with the gift of generosity, with things to give. If you're going into debt, and because I once knew a couple who claim to have the gift of generosity, but they're borrowing money from other people all the time and spending other people's money and living off other people, and they thought they had the gift of generosity when they actually had the gift of mooching. But we're not going to get into that. But if God's called you to, I was online too. If you're watching this, Lord's convicting. Anyway, okay, you guys. So. If you feel you have the gift of generosity, God's going to bless you with things to give. So He's not going to bless you to take advantage of other people, to bless other people. Just remember that fact. He's going to take care of you if you have the gift. Now, for the rest of us, where it can get hard to reach in that pocket and to help out, we're called to still live a generous life. And it's just going to take us a little more work because it doesn't come as freely as those who are blessed with a generous spiritual gift of generosity. So I kind of broke it down to what we call a giving ladder, which is not, I didn't invent this, it's just something that's out there. The idea is that if you want to live a generous life, you can take it in steps. Some people can just jump right in the deep end, and some people need to wade in. And so as we kind of walk through these steps, it's just ways that you can say, where are you at, and what's my next step in a generous life? So the first type of giving is called, it's basically just first-time giving. And we call it first-time giving step, or the first gifts. And it's the idea of like the first time you ever give, right? You break the ice. So maybe it's just like you feel, convicted to pull something out of your wallet and you put it in the offering plate for the first time, or you put some money in the bell ringer, or you buy something, a cheeseburger or something. You give that way. Hopefully you can remember the first time you did that, because everybody had to have a first time. So we all had that step. The first step you give is just to randomly give. And I remember sitting in church one day as a teenager, feeling convicted to give what I had in my wallet in the offering plate. And it was just like, okay. And so then from now on, after that, I just made sure my wallet was empty when I came to church. But yeah, so
that's online too.
Anyway, I did not say I was the best Christian as a teenager, all right? I didn't say I was the best. But I remember feeling just to give it all, and it wasn't a lot, but I'm just kidding. I didn't think that far ahead to empty my wallet for going to church. So, but I remember that first time gift. That first time it was like, I need to do this. And so we all take that first step. So maybe you're there, maybe you've given once, and it was exciting, but you're terrified to do it again. Encourage you just to, or if you haven't given that point, encourage you to do that. First, just take some money, put it in the offering plate, stop by the bell ringer, stop by where someone needs help, just give them some money. Just give that first offering there. And maybe if you don't have money, see what you do have. Do you have time? Do you have resources? Do you have some clothes you can give away? I mean, do you need all those shirts and everything? Just start that first step. And the first step is the first gift. Now, if you stop there, that's not a good place to stop. Right? That's just like getting your toes in the water. You're taking that first step. The next thing is this. The step 2 is what we call occasional giving, right? And that just kind of like, you take the next step up in your giving ladder by, as you go along through life, you just occasionally give. There's no consistency. It's just like, all right, well, whenever you feel the whim, you just throw some money in the offering plate, or you feel the whim, you buy a guy a cheeseburger, or you feel a whim, you throw some money somewhere or do something on occasion, or maybe it's like, hey, this happened, so I'll give some money, or I need the Cardinals to win the World Series, I'm going to give a little extra, and hopefully God will pay it back to me or something. So they don't need the extra help, by the way. People make bargains sometimes. Anyway, so that's the next step. It's the occasional. It's not consistent. It's just wherever you feel the whim, and that's kind of the second step into the giving, a generous life and the giving life is there. And so you may see people like that. We have a lot of people like that. They'll come to church, and wherever they feel they need to, they'll throw some money in, or maybe they feel the need, and it's almost just like, well, I'll give if. And so that's the next step. It's still pretty far in the shallow end, but it's still going forward. And so maybe you're there. Encourage you, hey, acknowledge where you're at, be ready to make the next step forward. The next one is this. We call it intentional giving. So this is like, all right, I'm going to give, once a month I'm going to give some money to the church, or once a month I'm going to do this, or once a month, or once every so often, just it's set on a schedule. So you're being intentional and you're being consistent, doing something, right? And you're doing something. So this is the next step up from the occasional giving to this is intentional. Right? I'm intentionally going to do this at a certain time or this. You set the schedule. Well, this is not the end. This is like a good middle ground where people are getting deeper in. They're giving what they can or what they feel they can. Let me say what they feel they can is what I need to say. And it's the next step in. And a lot of people get stopped here. They're like, oh, well, we feel we can do this. We feel we can do that. We can feel this. It may not be the full, you may not be 10%, but it's just like I can give $5 a week or something, or I can give, we're gonna consistently do this. And so it's that idea of mentally setting your mind to, I need to do this consistently, right? So that's the next step, right? The fourth step is what we call tithing, right? And if you've been around, especially a Baptist church, any number of time, you're gonna hear the word tithing. Well, tithing is an Old English word for a tenth, right? So 10% basically. So it's Old English. That's where we get the idea of the word tithe from, tithing. And this is kind of the idea of the obedience level, right? God calls us to give, and we're going to talk more about it in a minute, but God did not give us in the New Testament a set number. He didn't say, you Christians need to give, as my followers of Christ in the New Covenant, you need to give X, right? So we're going to talk about that in a minute. And so, as Christians now, as we learn to grow in Christ, we've kind of floated out the idea of 10%. And we get that from references to the Old Testament, which were basically the temple, what they would give to the temple. God told the Jewish people they need to give 10% of this, 10% of that. There were some different things, and 10% was kind of the standard. So as a tradition, we hold on to the idea of 10% because that's a good number to point at. It's going to say, look, you want to be giving, shoot for 10%. That needs to be a good starting point, right? And notice that's the starting point. That's a good starting point to go and put your obedience on, and it's a good way to get yourself in the mindset of I'm going to give to God. I'm going to do this. I'm going to set this exact number. I'm going to make it a habit, and I'm going to make it a praise to God, and it's a good number to start, all right? So why a tenth? Why does God ask for a tenth more? Why do we say a tenth? And this is where the transition kind of happens a little bit, because the occasional, when you go from intentional giving, that's saying, God, you're important. I understand you want some, you're important to me. That's what you're telling God. When you're intentional, you're saying, God, you're important to me. When you go from intentional to what we say the tithing, like a 10%, you're saying, God, you mean more than my money. I love you more than what I have, right? Because he says, where our treasure is, where our heart is, that's where our treasure's at. And when we start treasuring God with more than money, then our heart will be with God. We put our heart with God, we're going to want to give to him, give his direction. And that's the idea of the 10%, is it's like a set number saying, look, it goes from just being, I'm going to give whatever, to I'm going to give this set number. All right? And so that's kind of the next step. Next step in growing in a generous life. Now, why a tenth? It flows out of the Old Covenant, and it gives a consistent target to aim at. So it gives you a set number. Like I said a second ago, though, here's the thing. That, again, is the Old Covenant, though. All right, and so the next step in the generous giving or generous life is generous living, right? And this is what we go above the 10% or whatever God's calling. Because here's the idea. In the Old Testament, there was a standardized system. In the Old Covenant, between God and his people, there's a standardized system, and it was down to the T. Like there was temple tax, there was, you just read through Numbers and Leviticus, and there's like, you got to give, yes. Oh, all this stuff. And even you read into the New Testament, the Pharisees, they're talking about how they tithed on their mint and the spices they brought back from the market and all this other stuff. And it was quite a system, a standardized system of giving. And it was, I think some people have referenced that they were required to give somewhere from 20 to 40% over the year. Because there's also like tithing of regular tithing, and there was like festival tithing, and there was quite a bit. It was all standardized and set. But when the new covenant came, Jesus, he said often, you heard it said, but I say. And we see him kind of raising the bar, and we're like, okay. So when it comes to giving then, in the New Testament, we're called to live generous lives. We're called to have consistent giving, joyful givers, blessed is the joyful giver, and sacrificial, right? So they replaced a tenth with sacrificial, which is what's scary, because then again, remember, we're led by the Holy Spirit. We're led by the Spirit in us and directing us. And so when the Spirit leads us to give more, we're to give more. And that was the thing about the Old Testament, is sometimes we miss that, is they had a standardized system, but then they would give above and beyond. And like when they were building the temple, they asked for above and beyond the tithe and above and beyond to make the temple. And people brought so much stuff, they didn't tell them to stop bringing it. They're like, whoa, guys, we got enough stuff, all right? And that's the idea of sacrificial giving. It's giving above and beyond what is asked for, above and beyond what God is doing. And so we see this idea in the story when Jesus is talking about a time Jesus is in the temple, and he's teaching about generosity. And this is Mark 12. It's called the widow's mite. This guy's in reference to this. It says this, sitting across from the temple treasury, he, being Jesus, watched how the crowd dropped money into the treasury. Many rich people were putting large sums. Then a poor widow came and dropped only 2 tiny coins worth very little. Summoning his disciples, he said to them, truly I tell you, this poor woman has put more into the treasury than all the others. For they gave out of their surplus, but she gave out of her poverty, and has put in everything she has, all she has to live on. Right? And this becomes our standard of giving. It's no longer, he says, look, these people here, they're doing what is exactly said of them, and they make a lot of money, so 10% to them is not a lot. I mean, it's a lot, but it doesn't affect them. They can give it and move on. This widow came, and she gave out of all that she had. She gave sacrificially there as worship, saying, I'm going to trust you, God, more than what I have. And it's a fascinating thing. And then that becomes the call of the New Testament then. To live a generous life is to give sacrificially. How does it affect you? How does it affect you as a person? Sometimes, maybe you're having this rough time, and maybe 10% is too much. Maybe you are struggling to buy food that week. Now, I'm not saying don't give it all, but give what the Spirit's leading. Like, there's been times, when we get to the end of the year, we're like, God, we could have paid this bill with this money. And, it's fascinating to see, but God always delivers. So, that's why 10's a good start. But when we give more, we give God, you can't outgive God. All right? And I love that saying. I hate it when people skew it, though. Because that does not mean that just because you put money in the offering plate that you're going to, double your investment back. You get double down here. I throw a 20 in, God's going to bless me with 40 later. Yeah.
It's like Vegas.
It's like Vegas, man. There's people who treat the offering plate like Vegas sometimes. And we do not teach that. You are building treasures in heaven, not here on earth. So you're not going to get a stimulus check back from the church because you gave, right? When you give sacrificially, you're giving to the kingdom work, to what God is doing. Every time you love and reach out to someone and give generously to them, you're giving to God. And you're building treasures in heaven. And we're all called to investigate our own hearts. What is God calling you to give? What is God calling you to surrender? And as Christians, as part of the new covenant, our job is not to say, all right, 10%, that's it, I'm done, I've met my obligation, because that's Old Testament, that's Old Covenant. The New Covenant is, pray. Seek God. What is God telling you to give? What is God instructing you? And there's a famous pastor named Rick Warren, and he gets some trouble sometimes, but he had this philosophy. He started out, him and his wife started tithing 10%. And they decided every year they're going to up it 1% and just give away to church and charity and stuff. And as he started writing books and becoming, his church kept growing and growing. So eventually started increasing it a bunch. And finally got to the place where they were reverse tithing, where they lived on 10% of what they had and they gave away 90%. And I'm not saying that everyone can do that. But it's the idea of, you don't need just to stop at 10% saying, I met my obligation. You need to say, God, what do you want me to give? What do you want me to do? How do you want me to share? And that's the call of the Christian. A generous life means to seek the Spirit's guidance. Seek what the Spirit wants you to do. Seek that first. And not live in the Old Testament where it was standardized, but the next step, you live that generous life, Lord, guide me. Spirit, guide me. Direct me. Right? And so that's the call of living the Christian life. I think I hit everything. That pause in the middle messed me up. So, you guys got any questions before we? I guess we could disconnect our friends and talk. Or you guys got any questions while our friends are watching? Any blasphemy? You want to yell at me? Pretty quiet. Okay. Well, goodbye. Have a nice night. Take care and God bless. Sorry.